Hello, Chatfish, and welcome to another Bunchcast. Today, we will be talking about a interesting sort of subject because it kind of affects the creative sphere as well as technology, and it's AI. Well, it's not AI; it's VI because we don't actually have AI. I think the word is a misnomer, wouldn't you say? I'm so clever, aren't I? Yes, I think I am.
Yeah.
Somebody has to agree with me, and Chuma's taking too long. Might as well be me. So, today we'll be talking about virtual intelligence and what does it mean in the short term. Now, virtual intelligence, creatively speaking, allows for people with basically no training, no skill to produce things, right? With relatively uh, no effort, all things considered. And that opens the gateways for a lot more people to be imaginative and explore their own ideas and thoughts. But that also has limitations, especially at present, because virtual intelligence can't actually create new things. Rather, it just blends things together like a little blender, but it uses certain criteria and search words to make something. So, one of the big things is that as you advance that technology, we will transition from something that we have now, which is virtual intelligence, to artificial intelligence or true AI. True AI will actually be something that's able to actually create something, or at least theoretically can, right? The idea behind AI is that it can write new code for itself. But that's kind of a scary thing because technically it's a form of artificial life. And that begs, the moral question of all right, well then, is it does it have rights?
Yeah. And then
Does
there's the
it
question how we
have
define what life is.
what is life defined by? Because currently we define life by intelligence, and if we make an intelligent being that's capable of rational thought and being afraid, then we've stepped in it too far, right? And that's why I think there should be limitations. Now, the reality is that there won't be because mostly because legislation is going to be too slow to do anything to set things right, to stop things from going too far. As we can already see, that VI stuff has gotten out of hand. It's basically a shadow of what's to come in the future years. It might be a decade from now, it might be decades from now, it might be a century from now before we have true AI. But who knows? But unless there's major breakthroughs. But right now, as it stands, we have virtual intelligence. And what is virtual intelligence? Well, virtual intelligence is the illusion of intelligence, right? It's the idea that we have a machine that can produce things, you can talk to it, and it will use a set of scripts and responses based on other user generated things. So, how this intelligence works is it takes all things, so whether it's art, it takes all art from the internet, which is legally questionable, and then uses that art to generate new art from that art, right? Because it can't do anything without a basis. Just like the chat versions require a basically a basis of logs of conversations. That's why I think the chat stuff is more impressive than the art. I think the AI art is probably the least impressive at the moment, mostly due to the fact that it has less references to run in its basis. Versus you compare that to chat basis, where there's a lot more like conversations and dialogue, but there's only so many explicit responses or responses to a subject that you could possibly have. Like if I say, "Hey, how are you?" It'll be like, oh, it'll pull from a series of responses based on other user responses. And then if I follow that up with another question or query, then there are, logged millions queries following that. Because conversations, as we have them every day, right? Even you guys right now are literally generating that right this moment, right? Simulating a chat.
Yeah, and chatbots, like the sheer amount of examples they can grab for those is staggering. Because I mean, chatbots, which literally were just you type a question, it searches for someone else who typed that question, and just posts whatever the response was. Was
Yep.
was the original chatbots, and those have been a thing for decades.
Yep, they were still a thing when I was in high school and in middle school, if I remember right. And you could ask it things like, oh, "Do you feel things?" I always asked it philosophical questions about consciousness and if it was conscious, and it would always eventually defer to it being conscious. But I think that's because a lot of queries were imposed upon that to basically make it answer that way, because you can actually train these things to respond a certain way. That's why when China made their AI thing, they immediately took it down, because the issue is that so many people will be flooding these queries and things that it will become incredibly dilapidated. And you can actually mass feed it things it breaks. I've done some minor experimentation over the week with some chat stuff, just to get a feel before talking about the subject, and found that it wasn't as impressive as a lot of people had made it out to be, because when you actually try to stress test these things, it starts to break things. Like names would break, or start adding words there, or it would forget things. And by forget things is because you ask thing again, slightly different, ask things slightly different. It doesn't like that. It very quickly, you can see the framework start to come apart. Where I think a lot of people are amused by this technology is that they ask it specifically normal questions as if you were having a normal conversation, which works the best. But the minute you try to like basically break the line or step off the little Ferris wheel, so to speak, the whole thing comes undone and unraveled rather quickly. So I was a little disappointed, because I had heard so much about it. I was expecting it to be way more impressive than it really was. And mostly it's cyclical too. Restarting conversations, like different hello introductions, I believe 30 or 40 times, which I did, basically results in the exact same responses, with only a myriad of variations, followed by the same queries over and over again. And then same segues lead to 2 to 3, maybe 5 variations, seem to be at most. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's not that advanced, but it's easy to see how somebody could be, right? Like if you were to play a video game and something would respond to you in that way upon inputs and stuff like that, you'd be very fascinated for about an hour, right? Until you tried to replay that game from the beginning and tried a different path, and then realized that the path wasn't really, like, the path you went was the better path because you followed a more natural route. But the minute you try to do something off that Ferris wheel, the whole thing comes undone. And so this can vary on depending on which models there are, because there's Grok, there's the ChatGPT stuff, there's a bunch of other ones, and they're all kind of, they have different responses because they pull from different databases. But what I found interesting, because the topic isn't necessarily too focused on this, is that when we talk about intelligence, this is what virtual intelligence is. It's not true AI. And true AI is something that we don't have. We don't possess yet. I do believe that someday humanity will make true AI. And when we actually unlock the technology to true AI, we're going to have something incredible and also incredibly frightening at our fingertips. Because I think the big thing is that while these advanced algorithms run on certain statistics and data pools and data points, they are fascinating pieces of technology, and code in general. And it's really cool to see. And maybe this, who knows, maybe this is the foundation of what AI will become as it continues to evolve. I don't really know. But one thing I do know is that once we actually reach the point of true AI, these things shouldn't require massive databases to pull from, because with the art ones, it always has to pull from a series of art databases to create something. Now, you can also argue that art itself, is derivative of life, right? No artist just makes something without some form of inspiration. Like, what is a fish? What is excuse me, what does water look like? All art derives from life. It's hard for AI to understand that, or, well, in this case, VI. Well, VI can't understand anything, actually, now I think about it. The word understanding implies something else. But it's hard for VI to... What's a term that makes sense for a machine? It's hard for it to process, if that makes sense, this information, because it cannot draw what water is without understanding what water really is. That's why when you watch like those AI generated like movies or whatever, or films, or clips, it tries to mimic water traits, but it always is unnatural with its movements, because it's basically pulling its database from a series of different films or movies or games and how they moved and animate things, and it needs more to draw from. Now, when I think we get true AI, one day when we actually get true AI, what that might operate under is like actual cameras, where it actually, records and calculates and actually handles and processes the physical properties of water. Because when we talk about water, water is a complicated beast, right? A wave rolling across the sands is massive in terms of like mathematics of what's happening physically there, as the wave presses and reaches certain resistance points and then withdraws from the sand, soaking and drenching the sand with moisture, while also pulling and pushing the sand, each pebble forward and backwards, washing back and forwards. And this can also lead to what we call erosion, right? Where water washes against something and it slowly erodes away as sand is pulled back from the shores. And this is also determined by different factors about what kind of soil it is, what kind of sand it is. Are there plants and vegetation? Vegetation helps its roots clump things together. It's what prevents erosion from happening as quickly. And so there's a myriad of factors, right? And at some point, as machine technology, processing, RAM, and everything, it continues to advance, we will be at a point in which a machine can actually calculate like 10 million particles of sand interacting with water. You know what I mean? And when it starts to be able to do that, we can start creating simulations and advanced simulations of erosion, and the AI can actually comprehend what is actually happening the water there. You can see this actually right now in early CGI, and I'm going to call it early CGI because in a decade's time this will be, ancient. But the most advanced CGI films we've seen of our time, right? We've got like explosions, mechs smashing through buildings, simulated particles and effects, simulating destruction of like what would happen physically if a mech punched through a concrete structure, and where that debris would fly trajectory based on the impact and how it shatters and how it breaks apart. Those simulations are incredibly simple, but as we continue to advance our technology, it can add more factors, right? What type of concrete? How dense is the structure? The rebar inside the concrete, how would that react? The steel beams of the structure itself, would it be like you punch through a wall in your apartment, but then you punch through another wall and you hit a board because that's part of the construction of your building, and so you break your fist. Things like that. And so when we talk about VI, I think the big thing is VI can't do any of these things yet, and that's why limitations are important to remember, and this is why it's